Such an interesting topic. I'm such an interesting title, Love Letter from Pig. I know she will tell us all about what that means. We can talk after. Can we talk about it after? Um, and we are excited to hear from Julie. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for attending today. So I will just say, Allison, that you mentioned the liberation of Auschwitz. I just heard from my daughter this morning, who lives in the Netherlands, that every year they read the names of the Dutch people who were the Dutch Jewish population who were killed at Auschwitz. They started last Wednesday, read 24 hours every day all the way through, and they will finish tonight. So,
Wow.
very painful history.
Yes.
So, as for my book, if you have questions about the title, I'll answer afterwards. I'll leave you a little intrigued, but let me begin. So, in 1964, my brother Luke was a medical student at Stanford, and he signed up for the Mississippi Summer Project. That's what it was called during the summer and was later named Freedom Summer. My parents, of course, freaked out, and my brother sent a letter home to explain why he had decided to volunteer. It arrived written on a napkin. So my brother was always scribbling notes, always writing. And I was 17 at the time, living at home in Rhode Island, and he was 25. Tragically, he died 2 years after Freedom Summer, leaving copious letters, diaries, and notes. And I begin my book with the letter that he wrote, actually a copy of his handwriting. And I return to it at the end, or toward the end in the afterword. And I wrote then, when Luke had written his letter on a napkin before going to Mississippi, he had explained why he wanted to go. I intend to live a principled life and to work for the things I believe. This helps to give purpose to my life. If you ask, why does he want to live an ideal? What a childish thing. He's a bissel mashugana, a little crazy, etc. Then I must say that I have observed the lives of a few people in Palo Alto who are living their ideals. They believe that failing to take a stand and rationalizing away your responsibility for what happens while you live will result in longevity if that happens to be your goal, but also in failure to live in a real sense. And so there's Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. As I said, my parents freaked out. We were raised on these kinds of principles, but they felt fear for good reason. He would be taking a great risk, more than he realized beforehand. So, an overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Freedom Summer to set the context, and then I'm going to share a screen, talk about more about what Freedom Summer was about. Why is my brother's story and the events of that summer relevant today? Breaking down racial barriers, that was a very important part of Freedom Summer. And you'll have 2 short videos where you get to meet 2 of my brother's Freedom School students. We'll talk about the murders of 3 civil rights workers that woke up the nation, the grief for them that shaped and haunted the summer for the community where my brother was working. And then I'll end the share screen and reflect on ways that Jewish culture and traditions influenced my brother and our family. Now, nonviolence was key, of course, as John Lewis has called it, good trouble, seeking equality and dignity, building the beloved community. Freedom Summer was a turning point. The civil rights movement had made headlines in 1960 with the sit-ins. Activists after that fanned out across the South because they realized there could be no equality without political power. There needed to be African Americans who had a voice And so voter registration was key. But it wasn't easy in Mississippi. Bob Moses, very important man, was the head of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Mississippi. He and his group of SNCC activists were doing this very dangerous work, but it was going slow. It was so dangerous just to try to register. So to increase the number of registrations, he realized that they needed help. He proposed that they would recruit white and Black volunteers from the North who were not familiar with their community to come down and help them register voters. There was conflict within his group of activists. They asked, "Isn't this our struggle? Won't they just take over like they always do? Why do we need white people?" But the group agreed finally that they would recruit whites and Blacks from the North. Now, Bob Moses also had an incredible brainchild. It was his idea to establish the Freedom Schools in each of the locations where voter registration would be happening. And that would bring teens into the movement, teaching future leaders of civil rights about citizenship, about their culture and Black history, all the aspects of voting. And the idea was also that the teens might interest their parents in becoming more involved in the civil rights movement itself. So now I'm going to share the screen. Let's see how this goes. I have to set up this, and here we go. And I go to, so here's the title of my book, and I will tell you about the title a little later. Okay. One man, one vote. Here is a poster, and this was the rallying cry for Freedom Summer. In 1964, only 6% of African Americans in Mississippi were registered to vote. It was incredibly dangerous. You could lose your life, your home, your job, everything, if you just tried to register. Why is this relevant today? Obviously, the Supreme Court has effectively canceled sections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That bill passed as an outcome of Freedom Summer. And now state legislatures around the country have been creating new obstacles to voting. And there's just a new bill being introduced into the federal Congress to make voting even harder. How did the white community respond? Here is a poster, a recruitment poster from the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan was revived in the spring before Freedom Summer when whites heard, or segregationists heard, that this was going to happen. They also formed white citizens' councils, which included businessmen and policemen, many of whom also were clandestinely part of the Ku Klux Klan. Andresa, who you'll meet in a moment, she said she was 17 at the time, and she said that what she heard from the white community before the summer began was, "We don't need no outside agitators. We have our Negroes under control down here." So why is this still relevant? Here's a sticker that I found in 2022 walking along a bike trail that's right close behind my house. White Lives Matter is around here. There are many other white nationalist groups, and the violence continues. White supremacy is dangerous, and there's been so much violence. You can think about Charlottesville, and of course the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. So even before the summer began officially, on June 21st, there was news that there was the disappearance of 3 civil rights workers. Mickey Schwerner is on the right, James Chaney, who was local to Meridian, where they were working, in the middle, and Andrew Goodman, just 21 years old, was a new recruit. So James and Mickey had been going to the Mount Zion Church to try to set up a freedom school, and they were talking with the pastor and the members of the church there. They were at an orientation for new volunteers who were coming to Mississippi when they got news that the Mount Zion Church had been burned to the ground. They asked Andy, who was a new recruit, if he would join them. They drove through the night. They were in Meridian in the morning, and then they went out to Philadelphia to investigate the burning, and they disappeared. So my brother was at an orientation, and leaving his orientation, the volunteers were handed their assignments, either to do voter registration or teach Freedom School. Luke would be a Freedom School teacher in Meridian, and he was stunned. Meridian? Ooh, not Meridian. That's where Schwerner came from. What? We're going there to take Mickey's place at the community center. Good grief. What will my parents think of that? We are going to restore the community center, which was closed down after their disappearance. There is a strong obligation for us to do a wonderful job for Schwerner. My brother felt a special kinship with Mickey Schwerner. They were both secular Jews, born in 1939, right on the cusp of World War II, and they grew up under the shadow, or in the shadow, of the Holocaust. Mickey knew that it was inflamed hatred that had led to the death of his relatives in Europe, and he wanted to be an obstacle to hatred wherever he could. My brother wrote in his diary about nonviolence. I am fighting a nonviolent battle because I believe that hate begets hate, and perhaps that love begets love. So here is the community center on the 2nd floor that Mickey started, that was reopened. And there was space for the administration of the summer, for the voter registration, and the largest room was the community room and the library for the children. The young children went there. And much of the summer was about breaking down racial barriers. So here is a picture of my brother, and the 17-year-old straight behind him is Andresa, who you heard before. And she was a Freedom School student of my brother's. He taught biology as well as citizenship and Black literature at the high school. Here is her younger sister, Dorothy, who was 13 in the picture, and their friend, Linda Jones. And here on his left is 5th Street, Red, who lived right across the street, and you'll be meeting one of his brothers in just a moment. Now, I have a video on the right, up in the corner here, is Steve Yates, who is co-director of, or one of the directors of the Mississippi, the University Press of Mississippi. And he won't be speaking. I have just a short clip here. There's me on the bottom, and on the right is Gail Falk, who was a volunteer, a very close friend of my brother's, and then Andresa up at the top. And I've been asking her about her experience with white people before the summer, and then we segue into how were the volunteers different. And I have to tell you that one of the great surprises for me, I met Andresa and her sisters, 7 of them, down in Mississippi in 2014 when I went to a reunion that was Mississippi Summer reunion, Mississippi Freedom Summer at 50. And then I learned that Andresa and her sister Dorothy happened to live in Albany, New York, less than a half hour from me. So we have become very close friends. All right, now I'm going to start this. Oops. Oops. Let me try again. No.
Black people in Mississippi.
Wow. So how were the volunteers different?
They were different in the fact that they did not pose a threat the way I saw it. They were nice and friendly. At first, we thought they were too nice and too friendly because there was these white people that wanted to talk with us, wanted to be friends with us, and you had to kind of step back and look at it to see if they were trying to do some harm to us or trying to get us to get in trouble or something. And as time went on, that did not turn out to be true. And in large parts of it, though, was because of Luke. He was nice, he was really friendly, and he would talk to us, and he would actually let us touch him. And it was kind of like, wow, touching these white guys and they're talking with us. So it was really an eye-opening and educational as well. Only beyond the books, it was educational because we got to know them and we got to understand some of them were not out to get us. So it was quite an experience.
So here is my brother in the library at the community center. Now, the Freedom School in Meridian was the only place in Mississippi that had its own separate school. So most of the time he was there working with teenagers, but the younger children, including Dorothy, who was 13, would have some education learning to read and write at the community center. And he loved the young kids and he loved being there. And we all know that in every Jewish family, I would assume everyone, there is great value placed on education. So teaching was right up my brother's alley. And here he is. Now, one of the kids in the Freedom School was Len Ray Gandy, who is the brother of Fifth Street Red, who you saw earlier. And Len Ray was 9 at the time, and my brother called him the Dreamer Kid. Now, I'm about to show you a video where last year in March, Gail Falk, who you've seen, my brother's fellow Freedom School teacher, she and I did a presentation at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum in Jackson. Len Ray had been in touch with us and wasn't supposed to come. He was going to Zoom in and watch it, but he couldn't resist. He's still working. He told his crew at the Navy that he had to make this, and he walked in just as we were starting the Q&A. You know, we have a remarkable situation right here now, because I'm glancing over at Len Ray, who was a student at the Meridian Freedom School. So, Len Ray, do you want to just say a word about?
He was a little boy.
You were a little boy.
he was
You were
too young.
what?
Yeah.
You were 9?
9 years old.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, from day one, because I lived across the street from the Freedom School, I could close my eyes and just walk, and I'll be right there.
And Len Ray, you should know that I did have a little bit of imagery, and your wonderful smiling picture was one of them.
Yeah, I think my parents went on and just pushed us on out of the house. That was our playground, the Freedom School. And it was a wonderful place. It changed our lives. It changed our attitude about the world. First, as a child, riding in the back of the bus and drinking out of the colored water fountains or using the colored facilities, restrooms. And then all of a sudden, a movement comes there, and then you can be a part of it. Even as a child, you can be a part of it. And and it was just wonderful. We all just blended in when her brother Luke was there, and Gail, I love you so much, was there, and Freeman and everyone else. It made a big change in our lives. Made us all look upward. And knew things were going to get better.
Yeah.
I met first, January '64, Marco Schwerner. He was my very first white friend in life, killed by the KKK. And he treated me like I was a human being. And that was something. White man right there who's treating me like a human being. And my grandmother always said, hey, there's good people. All people are good people. There are some. And that made a change in my life.
Wow. Thank you. You know, so I apologize for the fact that the closed captions didn't work so well all the way through. I tried, and I'm not sure what happened there. But in any case, hopefully you could hear it. I know that Len Ray held the microphone too far from himself. It was a little soft. So the cover of my book shows this wonderful photo, and the full photo is inside the book, which is the march. So the FBI began investigating after the disappearance because it was announced, 2 white boys had died in Mississippi. It got national attention. It wouldn't have if it was just Black folks who had died, sadly. So anyway, the FBI had been trying to find the bodies. They'd found the car that was burned and dumped in a creek, in a swamp within 3 days of the disappearance, but the men were not in the car. So early in August, on a tip, the FBI was able to find out where the bodies were buried, and they excavated a newly formed built earthen dam. More than 15 feet down, the bodies were excavated, buried one on top of another. So at first, the boys' parents wanted them to be buried together, but that was not to be because segregation required separate and not equal graveyards in Mississippi. So the Cheney family then planned a private funeral. My brother was a medical student. He was interested in social psychiatry and social psychology, and he realized that the entire community needed to grieve. So he came up with an idea to have a march that began in different places in Meridian and would converge on the church. It was a rather risky idea, but he was given the go-ahead. He and Gail headed the committee that planned this march, and it was a very silent and dignified march. And he wrote, "White people came out of their houses as we walked past. We were dressed in dark clothes, and we walked silently and with great dignity. I feel certain that some of the white people must have felt sympathy, and that some of them would have even joined us were they not afraid of the disapproval of their neighbors." So, of course, there were some white folks living in Mississippi who did participate actively in the civil rights movement, but not many. And there were people, of course, who weren't violent, but stayed silent. Luke and Gail did visit a synagogue. The situation was not easy for Southern Jews who wanted to be accepted into the white community. And Luke wrote, "We had intended to go to the synagogue tonight. Jews should understand better than most the horrors of prejudice. But the rabbi said, 'We have suffered for 2,000 years. Let them suffer.'" And here is a picture from much earlier, me and my brothers. And you can see from my stance that I wanted to be just like, especially my brother Luke. And he was the only person who ever called me pig, because as a child, I mispronounced big. I wanted to be big. I was the youngest of four. I have a sister as well. And so anyway, he kept it even as we grew up. So now I'm going to end the share screen and come back and talk to you about the fact that although my family was very secular, we were very much influenced by Jewish culture and tradition. My mother's mother, my bubby, lived with us. She was from the old country, and she infused a great deal of the culture and traditions and the foods and the Yiddish into our lives. And to show you this, here's an excerpt that my brother wrote. He wrote letters almost daily. In Meridian, helping the children cope with the devastating news was uppermost of Luke's concerns. He made this entry in his diary, quote, I went to the community center today and asked the kids in the ancient Passover style, why is this day different from all other days? The kids answered, because Mickey and them are dead. What were they like? I asked. I never had a chance to know them. Many little arms were raised and all spoke at once. Answers like, he had a beard. He used to play Frankenstein with us. He took us on drives in the country. He made us work hard. He talked about dignity. Why did he leave his home in New York to come to Meridian, where life is so hard? Because he knew that we needed him. He wanted to help us get our freedom. Freedom for what? What was Mickey really fighting for? The kids answered, freedom, and seemed puzzled. Some said civil rights, some said equality. Fran, age 14, said that Rita Schwerner, Mickey's wife, once said, we want you to be able to live where you want and go where you want and love who you want. I told them that perhaps the most important thing that Mickey was fighting for was love between all men. This is what Mickey was fighting for. I asked them, what would Mickey want you to do now? What can we do to carry on his work? Now, in writing the book, I came to realize how anti-Semitism really changed the relationship between me and my oldest brother. So there was 8 years between us, but we were always very close. Then when I was 10 years old, we moved to a beach community in Rhode Island, and we did not know that the people who sold us the house were breaking a taboo not to sell to Blacks and Jews. So we were ostracized. And my brothers made up a joke. In 1960, when the civil rights sit-ins started, they would say, let's have a swim-in, because our property went down to the beach. And from there, we could see the private beach club that would not have us. And they would joke, what's your sign going to say? How are you going to hold it up as we swim? My brother returned. Oh, and then what I want to say is that my brother, for 3 years at that point, moved home to go to college. He commuted to the University of Rhode Island. And so he and I hung out in the kitchen and hung out a lot. And he involved me even in social activities with his friends, with his girlfriend, and all of it. Luke returned to Mississippi in the fall. And he was jailed quite a few times. Then when he went back and stayed at medical school, he saw many things in the North that reminded him of segregation in the South. And of course, we have segregation by law, de jure segregation, and de facto segregation by custom, which is still very relevant and continuing. He wrote an unpublished essay called The Violent American, and pondered the internal well springs of prejudice and violence. Projection, he wrote, is the basis for all our prejudices. We don't really hate Negroes or communists. We don't really know them. They are scapegoats, bad guys, people whom everyone hates, people who are too weak to fight back. We see them as symbols, and they represent the frustration, loneliness, and ugliness of our lives. We hate ourselves, and we turn our anger on the scapegoats. Why have we humans harbored this tendency to demonize others? Luke wrote, we are apathetic because we suppress our feelings and consider it immature to talk about love and hate. It is realistic to be frightened. It is imperative that we recognize and deal with our violence before we succumb to it. So this really is a love story on many, many levels. And I want to just end my section before our Q&A with a song. And please, you can keep your audio silent for the moment because it would be cacophony, but feel free to sing along with me. Freedom songs were such an essential part of Freedom Summer. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, Lord, keep on a talking, Lord, marching up to freedom land. If you know the song, sing, and you can hum whatever. Let's do it again. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me round. I'm gonna keep on a walking, Lord, keep on a talking, Lord, marching up to freedom land. Thank you. Ellen, I could see that you sang. Thank you.
Thank you. We had some singers here in the room too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Lovely. We could just spend the rest of the time singing. I know a lot of freedom songs, but I'll bet that there are some questions. So
Yes. Well, before we get to the group, just can you tell us a little bit? So it sounds like you have had some of your own experiences as a freedom fighter, or can you tell us a little about what you've been involved in?
well, you know, I've been involved in things. I was very, very much influenced by my brother, of course. When he died, I was in my second year of college, and then the Black Panthers began. I was at Brandeis, and a couple of mornings a week, I would go with a neighbor. We would take our young little, infant children, put them in the back of the car in their nighties with bottles and drive to Roxbury to serve breakfast because the Panthers did free breakfast. So they, in addition to carrying guns and not being nonviolent, which sort of happened after Freedom Summer because in some ways the nonviolence didn't work. The Panthers did do quite a bit of community building. So I was a little bit of a part of that. And, was involved in various ways. I would say the main thing has been writing this book and now, introducing my brother and his story to so many people.
Sure.
And so, for instance, I'll be at the Vassar Temple with Andresa in person at the end of March doing a program. And I have done things in the theater in Albany, the Repertory Theater, Capitol Rep, and at bookstores. And, I've done some things with Gail Falk, and Gail has done bookstore events in Vermont where she lives. And one of the joys has been getting to know all these people who knew and loved my brother. That's really helped with the grief. And I have to tell you that I just heard from Len Ray the other day that he will have made his decision, because he said he was going to do it on Friday, whether to run for the state, the lower house of representatives in Mississippi, because the representative for Lauderdale County, which includes Meridian, just died, and a lot of people are encouraging him. And you could tell from his energy how incredibly wonderful he is. So so I
That's
hope to
exciting.
be more involved with the civil rights movement wherever I can.
All right. Thank you so much for all that you've done. And how about how did the book come about? I mean, I know you had the letters, but what made you think to turn it into a book?
Well, I wanted to write something different. I'd been writing a lot of grants in order to have money to do my teaching artist work. I worked in arts and education with children. And I went to a workshop on memoir, not thinking I was going to write a memoir. And walking home from my library, where I'm a longtime trustee, and I'd gone to this workshop, I thought, if I were to write a memoir, what would I write? And immediately I felt my brother's presence, and I realized that my grandchildren would never, ever know him unless I wrote about him. And I started by writing in the first person child's voice, children's stories from my early memories, knowing I was always going to write about Mississippi because that was such an important thing. But that was off in the future. It would require a different voice. I wasn't there. It would require a great deal of research. So in 2014, I went to meet with Gail Falk. I found her. She was in Vermont. We met halfway. And one of the first things she said to me is, we're planning this reunion in Meridian. You know, we're going to be at our various sites around the state. Do you want to join me? And of course, the immediate answer was yes, of course. And when I went to the reunion, I had no expectation that I would meet former Freedom School students of my brother. I knew I would be meeting volunteers. So there have been so many surprises along the way. But I kept my grandchildren in mind, and after about 2 years of writing, I realized this is a bigger story. It's not just for the family, and I ripped the whole thing apart and started over with a general audience in mind, but keeping my oldest grandson in mind, because I wanted to write a book that could reach teenagers, older teenagers, and he lives in the Netherlands. And so I knew he would know very little about American history. And one of the questions in the book was, how do you write this multi-layered book where you have history that doesn't overtake or overburden the story, but gives enough of the context? And then, of course, there's the narrator's voice, there's my voice as a teenager, there's the memories of me as a kid. And I realized, oh my goodness, I have to be a character too. People are going to want to know me too. So there were lots and lots of questions as a writer.
Wow, I can imagine. Okay, anybody in the room here with a question or comment? Oh. She did. Yes, somebody was asking if you explained the title, but that was a cute story. So was your brother the only one who called you pig?
He was the only one, but in his letters, you know, which are in the book, he, you know, hey, pig, you know, write to me. Let me know what your opinion of my going to Mississippi is. I respect your opinions. So, yeah, he was the only one. And it was a term of endearment, not
Sure.
a tease.
Right. Anybody online, Ellen, or somebody who wanted to unmute? Ellen, go ahead. Oh, uh-oh. Wait, Ellen, you got a double thing going on.
Yeah, the problem is
Okay.
that
You're good now. You're good now.
okay, the problem is I watch you on iPad, but I can't hear on my iPad. It's just so soft. So I put my phone on so I can hear. Could you repeat what you told us earlier about reading those names from Auschwitz?
Yes, in fact, I will read to you exactly.
Yeah, Ellen, I'm going to mute you while.
Yeah.
'cause
I'm going to
it's-
read to you exactly what my daughter wrote this morning. So I have one daughter in the Netherlands and my other daughter lives in Hawaii.
Oh my
And
God.
we chat all the time. Okay. So my daughter wrote, and she's changed her name to Rivka from Rebecca. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the freeing of Auschwitz. Take this in. Last Wednesday morning, they started the process of reading all the names of the more than 102,000 Dutch Holocaust victims. They read the names aloud one by one for 6 days and 5 nights nonstop. Tonight, they'll finally reach the last names on the list. That's how long it takes to read the names of the Dutch victims back to back without a break. And then she sent from the newspaper you could watch the reading of the names live streamed the past days and nights. And from what I've learned, more Jewish citizens and those who took refuge in the Netherlands were killed than from any other European country. So my daughter's very aware of all of that, living in Rotterdam.
Okay, thank you. Where do you live now, Julie?
I
You're
live
New-
in North Chatham, New York, which is in Columbia County. It's very beautiful and rural in the Hudson Valley, and it's about a half hour from Albany, the capital, where Andresa and Dorothy live. And of course, I'm sure all of you know, you're in New Jersey, that Albany is the capital of New York.
Okay. And how interesting that your children are all over literally the world.
Right. And they grew up in Albany, so
Well,
they are. And actually, in a couple of days, I'm heading to Hawaii to see my daughter
oh, how
and
nice.
grandchildren there.
Oh, that's great. Do you imagine yourself writing any more books?
I'm not sure. I know that I want to do some more writing, and at the moment, I'm kind of taken up with book events. Still marketing the book. I do have an audio book. I just have come out with a website, and I'm pretty engaged with activism right now in terms of immigration, the sanctuary movement, and with Third Act upstate. Third Act is from 350.org climate issues on the state level now, because nothing's going to happen on the federal level.
Mhm.
So if I can fit the writing in, I hope to do it.
Sure.
But I don't have another book in mind at the moment. That will emerge.
Okay. How could somebody get an audio book? 'Cause some of our participants, that's how they consume their books.
I'm happy to say it is widely available. So it is, if you look up the title of my book as an audiobook and you make sure I am the narrator,
Oh,
it's
good.
available on all kinds of sites, including
Got it.
Audible and
Okay.
audiobooks,
Okay.
etc. And
Uh,
I
how-
love the audiobook. I loved doing the narration.
Yeah. What was that experience like? We haven't talked with an author yet who did her own audio book.
Well, I always intended to do it. And then the press went ahead and gave it to a media company, and I had to fight actually to get it back. That's why I say, look
Wow.
for me as the narrator. Anyway, they gave me the copyright back. And friends of mine, a man who does audiobooks, recommended a wonderful, wonderful sound engineer over in Western Massachusetts, in the Berkshires. And I was in a teeny little booth with a microphone, with headphones, so that he and I could talk to each other. And it was quite an amazing experience.
Wow.
So I was a concert performer I have sung, I have spoken, I have told stories, for so much of my life. But reading is a little different. And then he had a person, you know, who listened back for any, breaths that were out of place or mispronunciation of words or, any of these things. And then we went and made corrections so that it's very correct.
That sounds really interesting and
Yeah.
very professional.
Oh, it was very professional.
Mhm.
And I also sing. So my singing voice is in the
Wow.
audiobook, which is unusual. And I put a little surprise at the end, which is one of the works that I would perform as a concert singer that was on a record of mine that had been produced years earlier. And it is a song to heal grief. And I love this little piece, and it ends the audiobook, I think, in a really unusual and beautiful way.
Oh, sounds lovely. I mean, we got to hear a little of your voice before, so I can imagine it's a beautiful section.
Thank you.
Right. Did anyone else have a question? Wait, I do have somebody in the room. This is going over to Joe with the microphone.
Hi, Julie. It's Joe Adler, formerly of Albany, with my wife Miriam, and I moved
How
in
nice.
2017. And you probably know my brother-in-law, Fred Reingold, who lives not far from you in Chatham. If you're,
That's great.
yeah. Anyway, but question. As somebody who's very much still an activist in terms of trying to combat all types of bigotry, what do you think why do you think that there has been so much of an increase in anti-Semitism and other forms of, racism, homophobia,
Mm.
LBGT, prejudice, so forth in the last few years? What is your own take on that?
Well, I think that there are several reasons. I think that those of us who have more progressive and open-minded views moved pretty fast, and there was always reaction. The reaction was not organized in the past. And with social media giving amplification to these voices and chat rooms and the rest of it, it began to, there was momentum for this. I think there's a lot of loneliness, just like my brother said, we hate ourselves. There's documented tremendous loneliness in the United States. And having studied a lot about totalitarianism, loneliness and anger, resentment are big drivers of wanting a strong man in there. And then I think that Donald Trump gave permission for all these voices to be heard. And I think that you can't discount what I've been reading from Robert Reich lately, which is that the immigration issue really is a distraction, because what's really going on is a consolidation of power in the hands of an oligarchy. So the billionaires are gaining power and having a voice and taking over, and like marionettes and puppets, they are putting all these shiny objects in front of us and keeping us busy, fighting all these fires while, they're gaining corrupt influence and money and changing laws and the rest of it, which is really, a fascist effort. So I think that that's a big part of it. But I do think that that prejudice comes from not knowing. So, for instance, I did a lot of canvassing for the last election, and I was down in Philadelphia working with an organization called Seed the Vote. And we were knocking on doors. And one of the doors that I knocked on late in the day, 94-year-old woman in a quite wealthy house in a nice neighborhood in Philadelphia. She came out on her porch, and I said to her, you know, this was in September, and we were saying, you know, what are the issues that concern you? So here's this woman who lives alone, and she immediately said, the border. The border is my issue. We got to control the border. So, you know, there are all these sound bites, and immediately I could figure, you know, she probably listened likely, very likely, to Fox News, where this was the message you were getting. And this particular woman, I think, had very little to fear from immigrants and immigration. And I think that when it comes to deporting people, there's tremendous fear now in the Latino communities, but also it's going to disrupt our economy tremendously, particularly food, but all kinds of other things as well. So, yeah. Does that begin to answer your question?
Yes, he nods yes. Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
for asking that. It's hard to know how to proceed.
Sure.
But I do encourage people to form, you know, small groups and work locally and on a state level at this point, because I think quite a bit can be done.
Okay, another comment in the room.
During the 1960 convention, I rode on a freedom bus sponsored by CORE, Congress of Racial Equality,
Yeah.
to Atlantic City. It was a warming experience, a lot of singing, a lot of camaraderie. And secondly, I traveled to Mississippi at one point in my life. I was working in Louisiana, Baton Rouge. Read an article about the zoo in Jackson, Mississippi. So I decided to go to the zoo. I got to Jackson, looking the night before I wanted to go to the zoo. I was looking to see where the zoo was. Well, I missed my turn off, so I made a right-hand turn and then another right-hand turn. And after I made the third right-hand turn, the police pulled me over. They had been following me for a while and searching for drugs. I had New York license plates on a beat up old Nash Rambler station wagon. And they went through the car looking for whatever they wanted to find. Even opening up crushed up potato chip bags in the back seat. Fortunately, I stopped using drugs a couple of years before then. So there's nothing to be found. Just wanted to share that with you as well.
Wow. That is really quite
And
the experience that you had. And thank you for the work that you did. And you
Yeah.
know that the Democratic National Convention, which of course I cover in quite a bit of detail in the book, was a turning point because the folks in Mississippi had worked so hard and expected the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to be seated instead of the regular delegation, which only represented the white citizens. And of course, Lyndon Johnson was terrified that he was going to lose the South. And so what he lost the South anyway, but what he really also lost was the commitment to nonviolence and working through, you know, reformist channels. in the civil rights movement, at least for the time being there. And another thing I'll mention that's related is, you know, you were stopped and they were looking for drugs. Nowadays, with the new Laken Riley Act, the police could just point to you in the car and say, we accuse you, if you were Latino, of having drugs. And the accusation is enough to put you away and then deport you without a trial, without due process, without, you know, habeas corpus. I mean, all of it. So to our community of immigrants now, it's terrifying, especially if you're the wrong color.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. That's
okay,
very
yeah.
moving. And Louisiana, of course, had its also those things. And I'm wondering if you ran into Gail Falk, because she worked for the Southern Courier after Freedom Summer. She went back and was a reporter for quite some time before she went to Yale Law School. So I don't know if Gail's was a familiar name for you, Gail Falk.
Than that. I was there 4 years earlier than that. It was
Oh, okay.
1960, and it was Kennedy running against Nixon.
Right.
And there was a lot of picketing for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations trying to promote black folks from joining. Well, for one, I was a plumber, and they picketed the plumbers union.
Right. Yeah. Because it was
Hey.
segregated.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to pass on, Ellen had put a note that this was a very moving program. I think all of
Thank
us
you.
here also felt that way. And I will make sure everyone has the links to buy the book, audiobook or hard copy. And we really thank you for taking the time and the beautiful presentation and just sharing your story. So
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure. If you ever want me back to do a little program on the freedom songs and get people singing, I can do it. But
Sounds nice.
I encourage people to look at the website. It's quite new. It's not quite up to date, but it's juliekabat.com.
Great. Excellent. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Enjoy Hawaii, someone says.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure you will. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.